Greetings, those of you with good taste and discernible ears. My name is Fraser, and this is Until the Last Gasp, the Extreme Metal Podcast. Just want to let you know to get in contact with me. Just contact me through my Facebook, YouTube, or on my Rumble pages. This podcast is available on those platforms as well as Buzzsprout and Spotify, which has an accompanying playlist, which I have every song that I've covered on every show up until this one, which I definitely won't be putting any of these songs on because, good God, why would I subject your ears to that? But that playlist is called Until the Last Gasp Extreme Metal Playlist, and the links to that will be in the description. This podcast is produced by H.A.S.T.U.R Productions, and if you need any audio production work or work on your own podcast, for instance, contact P-Noise Productions at Gmail, which is spelled P-Noise, P-N-O-I-Z-E, productions at gmail.com. Also, just a reminder that pre-order for the Bandcamp for the release of H.A.S.T.U.R by Australia's Invocation with the bonus tracks is still up for pre-order. Still got a few copies left to go out of the signed ones as well. And also just this week, gotten the all clear and the quotes back. I've got a pre-order up for a Invocation t-shirt. This is the first time Invocation shirts have been made with the original H.A.S.T.U.R artwork on the front. That's the artwork that was used on the original year 2000 release. And on the back, there is some of the new stuff, the new sigil work that was done by Morbid, which is on the front cover, blended in with the logo and a nice picture of the band from back in the, I think it would be about 1999. So if you're after one of those, jump on them. There's only going to be 50 of those made, and that will be it. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is... Well, I guess I've been really positive about most releases and bands that I've covered. So this is a bit of a flip on that. What I'm going to do is cover those musical sins or faux pas, or probably more than that, the most egregious crimes against extreme metal, at least from my ear. I mean, there could be so many that I've just never heard. I'm sure everybody's got a list, and there could be any number of small town bands that have basically recorded in a trash can with a phone on a shoestring budget. But this is mostly going to be bands with a somewhat, or they have to be signed. They've got the record label support. And the reason for these records being as bad as they are is just almost no excuse. So with that being said, what I'm going to do here, I guess I would call this Crimes Against Extreme Metal. That would be these albums that I'm going to go through today. And what I mean by extreme metal is... I guess it's a pretty loose definition. Like there's extreme thrash bands, there's extreme death, black, all those kind of things. I definitely won't be going into any of the power metal or anything like that. And I've not really listed any death doom stuff because it's not exactly my forte. But, I'm sure there's a few out there that are bad. I just couldn't tell you because I've not listened to enough. And the only ones that come across my table are usually of pretty decent quality because I get fed those through other people who really dig that kind of sound. I guess in the mid-2000s there was a plethora of those bands coming out of the woodwork in the wake of Opeth's success and popularity, as well as the Catatonia rip-off bands, but I'm going to pretty much stick to black, death, thrash, and that would be the most of my list. So if you have any musical sins that you want to talk about from any other extreme metal subgenres, please feel free to list them down there, and we can just create a warning list to anybody who, doesn't want to hurl their cookies at the sound of some of these absolute abominations to the recording of, at least the discography of these bands. Cryptopsy, the Unspoken King. So the first band with their balls on the chopping block was Cryptopsy. Cryptopsy, when you used to think of Cryptopsy, I'm sure, for a lot of people we still try to, but we used to think of None So Vile, and when you think of None So Vile, you just get those great feelings of thinking, oh yeah, fucking brutal and extreme metal. The most brutal and extreme possibly you could get from the 90s, And so the tracking of the trajectory of the band that followed after that record wasn't exactly stellar, with the departure of Lord Worm and following the Mike DeSalvo records. Whisper Supremacy is pretty good, but everything after that wasn't exactly on the level, if we're being honest with ourselves. And the covers look like shit, really early digital art that wasn't great. Just kind of slapping a logo on a very basic digital art. And Production by comparison wasn't as brutal or extreme, but it was relatively okay. Same can be said for the return record of Worm Once Was Not. I was pretty hopeful from that record, though. The album after it were going to be heading in a better direction after having Worm back, fucking wrong. I was absolutely wrong. I mean, this doesn't even sound like the same band. You hear the Unspoken Kings and you're just completely at a loss. It doesn't even sound like them. Or at least what you are led to believe. It's horribly over-compressed guitars and typewriter drums. And they were not a tech death band. They were a technical death metal band. But then they started to become that kind of idea of a tech death band. And there is a fucking difference. There's absolutely a difference. Around this time, it seemed that Cryptopsy and bands like The Aborted, almost all these other death metal bands had adopted this balls as fuck sound that was just so trendy and full of compressed shitty plugins. They lacked any testicular fortitude, and so began my decade-long exclusive plunge into black metal after that, because I just could not deal with the homogenized fucking production. I've never listened to anything that they released after the Unspoken Kings. And for me, I think that's where the nail was finally in the coffin for me as far as Cryptopsy albums were concerned. And I've just never looked back. Sorry, boys, but that was it for me. Cradle of Filth, Thornography. You can say what you want about Cradle of Filth, and in doing so, others will say more about you in turn, because, let's be honest, by the mid-2000s, the band had an army of gothic top-hat-wearing vampire cosplayers, and with their previous record, Nymphetamine, they'd managed to hit the greatest commercial success and heights of their career, and even before that, they were on British TV with people's mothers, talking about teens' problems and their parents' distaste in their music. They'd become so commercial. I think they had probably one record and one EP where people may have thought that they were something, but they were still an extreme metal band in sound, maybe not in nature. They kind of were a bit of a toothless dog at that point, but even so, there was still a bit of extremity to their sound. After the commercial heights of Nymphetamine, their career made the balance of extreme metal and gothic metal kind of palatable for the younger audience of Bam Margera worshipping skater kids. So what happened with Thornography is anyone's guess. The Paul Allender riffs were kind of mid-tempo, plodding and tired at this point, and they painfully run for over 5 minutes with each song, and that's 5 minutes at a minimum. Sometimes they go for 7 or 8 minutes, and Danny's voice sounding as hoarse and completely lacking in his signature balls in a vice glass breaking highs. It just made you wonder how 6 years removed from Midian, which saw Danny and Paul's rejuvenated reunion, sounding like a creative renaissance for the band, taking two creative minds behind the first records, really, and infusing these gothic extremes from their dusk and cruelty periods. By this point now, and well, at that point, I should say, the bloom was really off the rose and the shit was wilted, really, and ready for compost, let's be honest. All the little gothic additions of keys, strings, as well as punchy production wasn't going to save this record as it had with many others. Cradle, well, not always extreme in sound, or at least consistent. And, shitting on a Cradle of Filth record is at no benefit to either fans or non-fans alike, because, you look... They'll just look at you like a used condom on a park bench for even touching their music if you're from the extreme sound, and you draw the ire of all the gothic gremlins and pasty filthians for anything you say about them, as they defend any turd that Danny can squirm out on any given day. And there's been plenty of turds after this one too, so this is just a no-win, digging my own grave kind of thing, but I'll definitely put this one in here and finish by saying that this record is the Kmart and Hot Topic era of metal. And if you can defend this one, fuck, what won't you defend or listen to? Honestly, this is a horrible record by a band that was well past anything that they espoused to be at that point. All of these ideas of satanic books that Danny was writing in the late 90s and all that stuff, really it was just Kmart metal. And I think even the people that would try to defend the band from the 90s with their kind of more vampiric gothic imagery, by this time it was indefensible or undefensible, however you want to pronounce it. It had nothing to offer anybody that was a loyalist to their sound. And if people didn't jump off at that point, well then, yeah, it's on you. Creator, Endorama. Remember when Creator was drawing comparisons to being Germany's answer to Slayer? What the fuck happened to that? The 90s happened, and when they hit, they demolished Creator, and the self-owning of this band just kept going from one self-inflicted wound to the next. This is one of the biggest musical sins of all time. I fucking love Creator. Even some of their more modern records, I do think they're all right. I mean, the chanty choruses get a bit much, but they're fairly consistent. This here is one of the worst releases of any band I've ever heard in my life. It was egregious. Every bit of this is the antithesis of their 80s masterpieces, and this record is pedestrian and sackless as it can get. If you want to watch someone pull a face like they just had someone piss in their ear, tell them you're putting on a Creator record and just sit them down and play a few chosen songs off this one, chosen few, or Passage to Babylon off this record. I find it funny how metal bands would do everything in the 90s to distance themselves from metal, apart from changing the fucking name of the band and making a new project. Who wanted a clean singing Millie anyway? Because fuck, people say Dave Mustaine can't sing. Well, subject your ears to this horrid collection of tone-deaf shit. Thrash bands were all decidedly gargling goat semen in the 90s, but few would try to chug it in the leaderage that fucking Creator were doing. They were trying to win that race, and they were gaining on their American counterpoints with some real fucking enthusiasm for it. Like Metallica, Megadeth, fucking Creator, all these bands were fucking shithouse. And I mean, you would never expect from one of the more extreme bands out of the 80s, one of the most extreme bands, that they would really jump onto that kind of commercial train. I mean, Metallica and Megadeth had the millions of records. Creator didn't even have that and alienated a huge portion of their fan base by releasing these fucking absolutely horrid records. One of the worst records of all time. Avoid it at all costs. Slayer, Diabolus in Musica. Now, this one might piss some people off, but to say that Slayer never went as weak as Metallica as a justification for this record is like saying that you would rather lick the skid mark in someone's sweaty jocks than actually eat the fucking turd itself. Like, I love Slayer, and in their day, they were the pinnacle of extreme thrash. They wrote the book on it, and they helped change music. And Jeff Hanneman was the fucking man and always will be. But with that said, this is a fucking horrible record. And no one riff can save any of these songs. The 90s were a bad time for metal bands, and I get that, but death and thrash metal collectively went to shit. So when we have to point the finger as to why it all died, we just need to look at the output of our flagship bands to know where it all went wrong. Was Slayer the worst of the bunch? No. But do I hold Slayer to a higher standard? Fucking oath I do. And rightfully so. Metallica and Megadeth and all those guys had all weakened off and released pop metal shit shingles years before, while Slayer was still holding strong with Seasons in the Abyss and Divine Intervention. Diabolus in Musica was like Slayer had some kind of situation akin to Jeff Goldblum and The Fly, but in this case, Coal Chamber got into the other transportation device and fused with this band and transformed our beloved Slayer into some hideous bouncing baggy pant yo-bro band. It was fucking terrible. Before anyone says it, I don't give a fuck how good people think Point is as a song. It's no hell awaits, and it's at the tail end to a fucking turd, so let's just flush it with the rest. The only terrible Slayer record, but they changed course after it, and God Hates Us All is thankfully no Saint Anger. Just like Demolition Hammer, where there is proof that a logo change is a bad sign, Also with Slayer, we have the same thing, but not to get off. Also, I just got to get off topic here. Somebody please remaster World Painted Blood. It's Jeff's last record and sounds flat as a plate full of piss. Somebody fucking fix it and never let Rick Rubin near another legacy band again. But to get back to Diabolus in Musica, absolutely fucking horrible record and indefensible. And if you like it, all right, you like it. I mean, I like some horrible records as guilty pleasures, but I can't sit there and defend them to people and say, no, you have to give it a chance. There's just some records that if you heard them at the time or it was your first record, you're going to accept it for what it is. Okay, but with years in between and looking back on it now, it's a fucking shit record, and we just got to own up to that. Slayer fucked up, but they didn't wallow in that. They moved forward, and thank God they did. Deicide, In Torment, in Hell. Shitty contracts and unhappy artists are not a rare thing in the music industry. It's a tale as old as time, and when someone is locked into a shit deal and they want out but have obligations, you can understand that their musical output may be affected and not reach their greatest creative heights. Shit, they might even struggle for inspiration, just due to the pressures and feeling that they've been cheated. But in the case of Deicide's In Torment, in Hell, Phone In doesn't even fucking begin to describe it. These are some of the most lackluster death metal riffs from a top-tier death metal band I think I've ever heard. Infamously bad and unjustifiably shit. This production is fucking horrible. They must have pocketed every spare dollar off this record and just kept the budget to a shoestring because, fuck, it is garbage and so unbelievably thin. A real bad faith offering to a label that was thrust upon unsuspecting fans. This record spelt an end for the heyday of Deicide. Their previous record, Incineratum, wasn't great, especially as a follow-up to Serpents of the Light. People had hoped to have something follow-up that was really felt like, you know, I guess a rejuvenation after maybe Incinerate Him, but this is just fucking horrible. Serpents of the Light was kind of the end of it, and the wheels had come off by this point. The next album would be the last for the classic lineup, with the Hoffmans leaving as well, so there must have been some problem in the band. Of course, the Hoffmans went off to reform Amon, which was the name of the band before it was changed to Deicide, but, you know, Deicide have never really sounded as extreme since, and evil and brutal since that time. So this album makes for a cool looking drink coaster if you want, because I'm sure you can get 4 of these for about $1 each, because nobody's going to touch this. It was a fucking shithouse record, and the fact that they thought they could palm this off just because they were going to fuck over the label, I mean, who do you think buys these records, dude? Like, fucking hell. I mean, Deicide's track record isn't the best for cancelling gigs and all that stuff, but, you know, what started here was a real fucking kick to the guts for any fan that went out and bought it, and I did, and that's why I'm a bit embittered about it, but fuck, you know, I mean, I got Jack Owen and all that in the band too. There was some pretty good stuff, but really, the extremity and the evil days of Deicide are well long and gone. Still love the band, but fuck, been let down a lot by them, and this was pretty much the first one to kick me in the guts. First incident anyway, so yeah, fuck this album. Don't buy it unless you need some drink coasters. You get them for $1 each. Massacre. Promise. Poor Cam Lee, that man, what he had to do to run from the memory of this backyard abortion would have driven anyone away from a further career in music. But damn, as musically shit as it was, he wrote the lyrics, man. And as I've stated in previous episodes, the mid-90s, I mean, I've stated in this episode too, the mid-90s was not a great time for metal. And the death metal scene too was busy collectively trying to perform some kind of, I don't know, parachuteless skydiving form of Harakiri, like Cancer, Demolition Hammer, Pestilence. Yeah, that's right, Pestilence. Fears is fucking shit. I don't care what anyone says. It's not a great record. And finally, the most egregious too was Massacre. Out of all of them, Massacre just fucking lost their mind. And, geez, they too plunged themselves into this incessantly crying all the way down dive from that plane. Like, From Beyond feels like the spiritual successor to one of the greatest albums of all time with Death's Leprosy. Then the follow-up EP, Inhumane Condition, added some weird sci-fi elements but had sound that was pretty much intact from the previous thing. And, yeah, it still kicked a bit of ass. And then silence for 4 years. And then what do we get? Promise. Who the fuck was expecting that? Not naming any names, but somebody, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, in the band must have gone through a horrible fucking breakup in 1992 and listened to maybe fucking, I don't know, some of Creator's shitty records from the 90s, maybe Renewal or something, for 3 years and decided it was time to pour out some of the most incel level fucking weak shit, obviously scribbled on tissues either full of tears or remnants of violently insecure ED wanks. And if you don't believe me, well then, sit back, gentle listener, and let me run you through some of the lyrics in a reading of Promise by Massacre. Tell me why you've become so damn unconsenting. The way you make me feel is so condescending. So help me, cross my heart and hope to die. You swore on your God to never tell a lie. So commit yourself to me, under hand and seal. Undertake this sacred oath. Immolate this deal. On your word of honour, consummate this pact. Bind yourself with me. Finalise this act. Promise me, promises, promising. Promise me the world. Promise me, promises, promising. Promise me the world. Song after song of that shit. With the most, just so fucking butthurt. A collection of the worst breakup songs you have ever fucking heard from a band completely lost in the wilderness and probably held hostage by the unchained emotion of a member needing to get a fucking grip. Fucking hell, man, you just need to fucking suck it up, move on with life, when something like this happens, If you're going to whinge this hard about a woman not wanting to have a bar of you, my God, you're something loose in you, man. Like, I could understand a 14-year-old boy in his first relationship falling apart. I understand some marriages fall apart, but, not everybody has a platform to sit there and espouse this kind of shit about their partner for a runtime over half an hour. This would be where restraining orders happen, This is too fucking much. 6 Feet Under, Nightmares of the Decomposed. When the mighty fall, people look on it in shock. When they fall down multiple flights of stairs in what feels like a small eternity, your concerns turn to laughter at how the idea of this is just some fucking ridiculous shit. How much further can people fall? And how far do they have to fall before they manage to do even the basic thing to save themselves and just end their own misery? That is the mental image I conjure up when I think of Chris Barnes and his output in 6 Feet Under. And Nightmares of the Decomposed is just the next flight of stairs. Like, oh my God, this set of stairs, though, is drenched in hobo piss and broken glass as well. Like, what the fuck was anyone thinking when this was being recorded and every step of the way up until the release? Chris, buddy, you're a legend, and that grants you enough leeway that people will take enough notice of your output. And it's because of that reason you would hope that you would strive in your efforts to at least deliver something remotely decent in quality, especially with all the fans that have endured the Graveyard Classics albums. I distinctly remember in 2012 listening to Undead and thinking, okay, shit, Chris might have been getting his vocals sorted out and, they're a little bit wonky, and the performances on albums like Death Rituals was shit. But fuck, was I wrong thinking that he was on the upswing of this? My God, that was just the momentum before the plummet. This fucking performance on this record is ridiculous, and I'm not going to deride the rest of the band members because musically they're doing probably what they're told, and they're as about as competent as the band's always been. There's probably members in, out all the time. But yeah, this record musically at this point isn't shooting skyward with lofty ambition. But coupled with this vocal performance, it's bad. And you can't help but notice more how dull these songs kind of sound with how bad these fucking lyrics and vocals are. I mean, I have no right to tell this man to retire, but also as a person with ears, I'm begging him to do fucking what he has to do. Like, I mean, so maybe smoke half as many cones between takes, mate, or something on your next attempt. Like, who is buying these fucking records now? They sound shithouse. It's a new decade, and you know what that means? Who's ready for fucking Graveyard Classic 6 or 11 or fucking 13 at this point? Well, who cares? Stryborg. Everything. Fucking everything. Proprietor of exclusively releasing bad music is Tasmania's Stryborg. Old Russ has peddled in unlistenable music in the past and fought long and hard to ensure that his blend of not even remotely in time or in tune depressive black metal would make even the most forgiving of listeners willfully perforate their eardrums instead of endure any more of the albums or any of these albums to completion. The fact that there is that many releases by this project is proof that there are enough people out there with money and they lack any sense. Most of all, which they're lacking is taste, unless it's in their mouth, given this record output, discography, everything. The largest audience exposure that he had was during the one-man metal documentary in which he was paired with H.A.S.T.U.R and Leviathan, and he, by comparison, had all the personality of an autistic potato. It's any wonder that his music is as bland and half-baked as it is. As the time drew on, he grew tired of this one-man race to be the worst musician alive and decided to change genres to where he could be aided in his horrendous output by drum loops and dance beats, making it his first mostly in-time output ever. What was thought to be his greatest gift to music by actually putting down any and all instruments was soured by his attempt at ambient techno music. We thought we were treated to the funniest ever recorded live show ever from Monofoma in 2021 as Russell screams over his laptop playing over the speakers, his vocals drowned in reverb and effects in a failed attempt to hide his lack of talent in what was his last lingering performative element in his musical excretions. But that's not all. During, air quotes, instrumental sections or interludes, he begins to fucking dance. Dance the dance of life. Dressed like a middle-aged mime cosplaying as 2000s era Fred Durst with backwards hat and all. I gotta say one thing for him, judged by his lack of inhibition in his dance moves, he's either cooking some wicked molly or he's got a seriously fucking great deal of hooking him up. If you want dark electronic shit, listen to stuff from Cold Meat Industries and fuck off with this horrible shit. Let me state this. If this is a band that you're into and it's your thing, your parents were right. You're a waste of potential and a disappointment. Now go to your fucking room. Morbid Angel, Elude Divinium Insanus. That's right, I couldn't pass up another opportunity to go again raining down the hate on an album by the Glowstick Dildos titled Audible Age, The Dance Club Extravaganza. That's Elude Divinium Insanus by Morbid Angel. I always mix those two up. Without a doubt, this is the single worst collection of credibility bonfires the world has ever seen. What thrash bands did in the 90s was almost brutal by comparison. Never in my life have I witnessed the downfall of a band to be as swift and brutal as I saw with Morbid Angel. They played in my hometown days before the record was released, and the leak of the album left everyone I knew dumbfounded by the pretentiousness and just absolute preposterous fucking output that this was. Like, what kind of shit were they peddling here? If you think that their performance that night had some backlash, you would be absolutely correct. From memory, they played I Am Morbid off this record, and the crowd just let them have it, telling Dave Vincent to go fuck himself altogether while flipping him the bird. There is no reason at all for this album to exist, and it will forever tarnish the once great band Morbid Angel forever. Fuck this record. It's an abomination. If you want a less painful time than listening to this, go nail your dick to a bench and pierce your butt cheeks, chain him to the saddle of a horse, smack its ass while it kicks the shit out of you and rips you apart. Fuck this record. And there you go. That's my opinion on some of the worst ever released music on labels that I think I've ever heard. And some people may disagree, and you might have a personal emotional connection to some of these records, and this is going to absolutely fucking piss you off. And that's fair enough. I mean, geez, people want to know my opinion on what records I thought sucked. I am asking me, I've been pretty verbose around a few circles on the shit that I think sucks. And my podcast hasn't reflected that, so I thought, well, fuck it. Now's a better time than any to do it. Maybe piss some people off, or maybe get a few people that are, I'm preaching to the converted about. But if you have any records that you reckon that everyone should avoid and want to just run the flag of hate up on that's right, create a flag of hate. Don't forget how good that shit was. Known as Endorama crap. Just saw that they got a new creator record coming soon, so I might have to give that a listen, see if it's any good. But if you want to talk with me about any of these things that I've discussed, or have a list for me to basically, gorge on the shit-filled chocolates within, just drop a list into the comment section here or on my Facebook page, and I'll be sure to have a look and we can converse there. Thanks again for listening to this episode. I do apologise for the delay. Had some crazy technical issues with my computer converting all of my audio files to 8-bit, making them sound like fucking Stryborg records. Well, probably better quality than some of those shit too. Anyway, time to get off this high horse of mine and get back to fucking reality. I'm not that great myself. Yes, fuck me. Okay. Anyway, thanks again for listening, and do join me again next week. I am not going to go too into depth about what I'm going to try and attempt to do for next week, just in case I do have my computer eat shit again. So I'll try and make that one maybe a bit more positive than this one, a bit of a return to the positive programming of old. So do join me next week, and as always, stay safe, play it loud, and support metal until the last gasp. Cheers, have a great week.